Let's take a look at how Mischa Barton and Artem trained for a dance.
The name Mischa Barton once represented a very specific moment in Hollywood history, a moment when youth, beauty, and instant fame collided so quickly that few were prepared for the consequences. At her peak, she was everywhere. Then, almost suddenly, she was gone. What unfolded behind that disappearance reveals far more about the industry than it does about one individual. Before continuing, Hollywood Spoiler Zone invites viewers to like this video and subscribe to the channel for in-depth documentary storytelling that explores the hidden realities behind fame. Mischa Barton rose to international prominence in the early 2000s as one of television's most recognizable young stars. As Marissa Cooper on The OC, she became the emotional centerpiece of a cultural phenomenon. The series did more than dominate ratings. It shaped fashion, music, and the public imagination of teenage drama. Barton's performance was widely praised for its vulnerability, and her image quickly became inseparable from the era itself. Magazine covers, red carpets, and major brand endorsements followed in rapid succession. Yet that success arrived at an unusually young age, and it arrived without pause. The pressure of maintaining a carefully constructed public image intensified as expectations grew. Long working hours, constant media attention, and invasive tabloid scrutiny became part of daily life. Behind the scenes, reports later suggested mounting stress and a growing struggle to balance personal stability with professional demands. As the show progressed, the character that made Barton famous also began to define her too narrowly. Typecasting concerns emerged, while creative tensions reportedly increased. When her departure from The OC was announced, it marked a turning point that few initially recognized as irreversible. What appeared to be a bold career reset would soon expose deeper vulnerabilities. After the spotlight dimmed, Barton's name began resurfacing for reasons unrelated to acting. Public incidents, health-related interventions, and highly publicized personal struggles shifted the narrative surrounding her career. Each headline reinforced a damaging cycle, one that Hollywood has historically shown little patience for. Opportunities became scarce, and the industry quietly moved on. This was not simply the story of a fading television star. It was the beginning of a much larger reckoning between fame, mental health, and an entertainment system that rarely offers second chances once an image fractures. As the years following her departure from The OC unfolded, the gap between Mischa Barton's public reputation and her private reality widened. Hollywood, once eager to capitalize on her fame, now viewed her through a far more cautious lens. Casting decisions increasingly favored reliability and predictability, qualities the industry often demands when commercial risk is involved. Barton, still in her 20s, found herself navigating an environment that had quietly withdrawn its support. Media coverage during this period rarely focused on her professional ambitions. Instead, attention centered on court appearances, hospitalizations, and paparazzi photographs that reduced complex personal struggles into simplified narratives. In later interviews, Barton would describe feeling overwhelmed and unprotected during those years. She spoke about exhaustion, anxiety, and the absence of meaningful guidance at a time when her life was under constant observation. Those statements offered context, but by then, public perception had already hardened. Attempts to return to acting continued, though largely outside the mainstream studio system. Independent films and smaller television projects provided work, but none carried the cultural weight of her earlier success. Each appearance was framed less as a comeback and more as a test. The question surrounding her was no longer about talent, but about stability. In Hollywood, that distinction can be decisive. At the same time, broader conversations about mental health in the entertainment industry were only beginning to emerge. Barton's experiences predated that shift, placing her among a generation of young performers who faced intense scrutiny without institutional safeguards. While some peers managed to reinvent themselves, others faded quietly, their struggles absorbed into the industry's collective amnesia. Legal disputes and public statements during this period further complicated her image. Even when resolved, they left lasting impressions that studios are often reluctant to challenge. The result was a career suspended between recognition and exclusion. Not erased, but no longer embraced. Yet despite the setbacks, Barton did not fully disappear. She continued to speak openly about her experiences, gradually reframing the narrative from scandal to survival. Her story began to resonate differently, not as tabloid fodder, but as an early example of the human cost of unchecked fame. By the late 2010s, the conversation surrounding Mischa Barton began to shift. Cultural attitudes toward mental health, media responsibility, and the treatment of young performers were evolving. Stories that once fueled ridicule were now being reconsidered through a more critical lens. In that reassessment, Barton's experiences appeared less like isolated failures and more like symptoms of a system that prioritizes output over protection. Barton gradually re-entered public life with greater control over her narrative. She spoke about the lack of support structures available to young actors at the height of early fame. Her reflections were measured, not accusatory, and focused on accountability rather than resentment. The emphasis was no longer on reclaiming stardom, but on understanding what had been lost and why. That distinction mattered. It reframed her career not as a collapse, but as an interruption shaped by circumstances few teenagers are equipped to handle. Professionally, her later projects were modest, yet deliberate. Television appearances and independent roles demonstrated a willingness to work without the expectations that once defined her. Hollywood, however, is slow to reverse its judgments. While nostalgia-driven interest in early 2000s television revived appreciation for the OC, the industry's gatekeepers remained cautious. The passage of time does not always restore opportunity, even when perspective changes. What remains significant is how Barton's story fits into a broader pattern. Her rise and retreat mirror those of many young stars whose value was accelerated, consumed, and then discarded. The difference lies in her willingness to speak plainly about that cycle. In doing so, she contributed to a growing awareness that fame, when granted too early and without safeguards, can be destabilizing rather than empowering. Mischa Barton did not vanish in the way headlines once suggested. She stepped back, endured public judgment, and re-emerged on her own terms. Her career may never return to its original trajectory, but her story now serves a different purpose. It stands as a cautionary record of how quickly Hollywood can elevate and how quietly it can abandon those it once celebrated.